one speaker, one talk, I really want to see it every weekend, that's booked purely because I want to see it, and this one is it. However, I'm sure Richard is going to be able to introduce Ronan and his activities in his own inimitable style. By the way, Ronan,
yes,
you are a very highly clever academic fellow person. You're no good at holding microphones, so can I just show you how to do it so we can actually record you for this, yeah?
Yes. Can you hear me?
No. Yeah, you have last time down there, and all I could hear was when you rubbed it against your beard.
A rustling sound, perhaps, yes?
It's the rear budget.
Well, well, that is a different story altogether. Will you come on and introduce me? I've got all day.
Right then.
If you hold it near your mouth rather than down near your beard, I think you'll find.
Oh, you switched it off, Richard.
Quick announcement first. They're pictures that are on display in the room down the bottom by Weasley. As prints, they're all on sale for a £5 if anyone's interested in them. They're all for sale. Right, what can we say about that feckless rogue, Ronan Coghlan? Well, he's a slot badger, he's a bush rocketeer, he's a small bean regarder, he's the crazy world of Arthur Brown, he's a pipe-to-pipe bushman, and he's here to talk about his sly-winking usury. Ronan Coghlan.
Now, when John asked me over to do a talk on theology and the extraterrestrial, I thought, the minute I start this, there'll be a huge thunderation of feet as everybody tries to get out before I begin. Because theology is not, let us face it, a science that appeals to many people these days. But there are one or two things I want to say beforehand. The first contains information about slides. Now you can first of all see that whoever made that slide had no idea how to spell my surname, and therefore it's there. But the other thing is, I didn't really want slides. I've never used slides. I'm not a technical person. But John said, people's attention spans are very low these days. And I said, nonsense. But looking up at the faces in the audience, I'm coming to revise my opinion slightly. Now, this is a serious talk, because John has asked me to do a serious talk on what the impact of the discovery better late than never, on what the impact of the discovery that there actually were aliens out there. Don't believe a word of that fellows, that there were no such things. That if there actually were aliens out there, what impact would they have on the churches? John's brother, as you know, is a vicar, and he has had a rather checkered religious career, from Wicca to Catholicism to goodness knows what. But he has an interest in theology, so I said, well, I'm perfectly prepared to bore the pants off everybody with theology if they all come to my lecture on the Duncannon incident tomorrow. That's the one you really want to see. I knew all the people concerned, and it's a UFO episode that is largely unknown. Now, the other thing is, in order to change the slides, there is an instrument called a zapper. Now, I am not technical. I don't know how to use a zapper, so David has very kindly offered to do that. And whenever I need the thing behind me changed, David, I shall call out, Excelsior! If you will change it. Have you got that word? It's Excelsior!
Yes, thank you, yes.
Now, when, a short while ago, a survey was conducted by a learned journal amongst general people of religious persuasion, various denominations, but all of them Christian, about what they felt would happen if it were shown that there were aliens, they said, oh God, it would change my whole outlook. It would ruin Christianity. We'd all have to think again, and thinking again is not a strong point with many people. The thing is that I ask myself, because I muse to myself sometimes, why? If you've got a God that can make people, why can't you have a God that can make aliens? And then I picked up a book called The God Hypothesis. And the God Hypothesis says that the Roman Catholic Church has had a campaign against belief in aliens and has been busily burning them left, right and centre, not aliens, but people who believe in them. Did I do that?
I think you rubbed it on your beard, Ronan.
1, 2, 3, 4. Can you hear me? Yes, good. Well now, I couldn't divine why there was any problem here. In actual fact, what the book states is absolutely untrue. I did some digging by way of the internet, and I found that in 1277, the Bishop of Paris, and 1277 is going quite a way back even for someone of my vintage. His name was Etienne Tempier, but I'm sure you all knew that, issued a proclamation that it was a condemned proposition to say that God could not have created other inhabited worlds. Now, what I'm going to continue to say could apply as much to ultra-terrestrials as extraterrestrials, and if anyone doesn't quite know the difference, an extraterrestrial comes from somewhere out there in space. An ultra-terrestrial comes from a coexisting dimension, through the wardrobe from Narnia, if you like. Just so you know what I'm talking about. Now, whatever about Etienne Tempier, or back in 1277 he'd have called himself Etienne Tempier, actually, because this business of the French not saying the last letter of the words didn't apply to Old French. You pick up all sorts of scintillas of knowledge when you listen to me. But the next person to speak on the subject of any great note was Nicholas of Cusa. Now, Nicholas of Cusa was a German. He was also a big shot in the church. He was a cardinal, a bishop, and people paid attention to what he said. What he said had a quasi-official status. And he said, "Listen, I'm a German and I'm going to tell you about ETs." What he actually said was, "We are not authorized to exclude that on another star beings exist which are completely different from us. In other words, you could have intelligent life out there." Do remember the distinction between star and planet in the Middle Ages was not very carefully maintained. The next person to mention it of any note was Athanasius Kircher. Now, some Forteans may have heard of Athanasius Kircher, but once again, looking around at the faces assembled here, I wouldn't like to see how many, but he was the last polymath. Now, a polymath is not a parrot that's good at adding up, it's someone who knows everything. And he had the reputation in his life for knowing everything. He was a Jesuit, and he too wrote on the subject. But in those days, astronomy and astrology had not been clearly differentiated. So what he said was, there were very likely people on other planets, but they would have the same temper that astrologers believed these planets engendered. People on Mercury would be full of good cheer and would dance around in elegant fashion. That was really elegant. Well, of course they would, because the ground in Mercury is so hot, but that is another matter. He thought that people from Mars would be rough, cruel, bellicose, and generally unpleasant, because Mars was the god of war. And he thought that people on Venus, because Venus was the goddess of love, would be very pagan in their attitude. I think he means that they'd all be at it like rabbits, but he didn't put it in quite that phrase. Now, going on, there was Angelo Scecchi. Angelo Scheggi, 1818 to 76, for those who are not familiar with him, said it was absurd to think that worlds surrounding us would be uninhabited. G. Van Noort, getting a bit more modern, said, those who believe in the existence of thinking creatures in other celestial bodies besides the earth in no way contradict true faith. So you've all these various Catholic theologians saying it's perfectly all right to believe in extraterrestrials. So where did the author of the God Hypothesis get his ideas from? Well, there was one rather misfortunate incident. There was a character called Giordano Bruno. He seemed to sort of move from one religion to another at the time of the Reformation with great alacrity. And he ended up getting burnt at the stake, which is not a pleasant way to end up and not a way I would recommend. But he said, among other things, there were other inhabited worlds. But the thing about Giordano Bruno was that he got up everyone's nose. He was an obnoxious so-and-so. So he went to the Catholics and got up their noses, and he went to the Protestants and got up their noses, and wherever he discerned a nasal cavity, he would get out his alpenstock and crampons and proceed with the ascent. In an age of intolerance, this was not the way to proceed. Now, Forteans probably will be, particularly older Forteans, and I see some of you are well past your sell-by dates. Older Forteans will probably be familiar with the name of Herbert Thurston, another Jesuit, whose most famous work was The Psychical Phenomena of Mysticism. It has been praised from time to time in the Fortean Times, and he too said, well, we believe in angels, we believe in demons, why shouldn't there be other things? I'm not saying there are. He was hedging his bets, but I see no reason why not. So the whole thing about the Roman Catholic Church is just not on. But what has the Church said about aliens of a positive nature? Harder to hold these things and turn a page than you think. Now, in order to explain Catholic theology, I'll be getting on to Protestant, Muslim, Buddhist and others shortly, but in order to explain Catholic theology and why there might be a problem in dealing with extraterrestrials, I'll have to briefly give you the doctrine of the redemption. In order to understand, yes, I've just read that. The RC Church teaches that the human race was tainted with original sin, which would have kept humanity out of heaven. Now, the Church does not. Excelsior! The Church does not require people to believe that the early... Oh God, that's Nicholas of Cusa. I passed him into the next Excelsior. Those are not Nicholas of Cusa. They are Adam and Eve, in fact. But the Catholic Church does not require people to believe that the story of Adam and Eve literally happened. It's a parable which shows that the human race, for some reason, as a collective, did not measure up to getting into heaven. And they would say that the sacrifice of Christ redeemed that. Now the whole trouble here is, what do you do with aliens? Are they covered by the sacrifice of Christ? Have they fallen into original sin at all? Are they so good that they don't need to be saved? And the whole thing is, of course, we don't know. Now, the theology of aliens runs as follows. Because of the notions mentioned above, we have to ask ourselves whether this means the human race is anything more than a species of very intelligent animal. The Bible speaks of God creating man in his image and likeness. Now, this does not mean that God has a nose, 2 eyes, 2 ears, and an avenging arm with an avenging elbow whenever he wants to avenge. God is, if you like, a spirit. That is the general doctrine accepted by most of the major Christian denominations. And incidentally, if there are any feminists in the audience, he is neither male nor female. We use the pronoun he, because calling God it would sound a bit peculiar. But we're talking in terms of a spirit. And if you're wondering what a spirit might be, try to think of a mind without any physical attachment, and you'll be onto a spirit. Now, a lot of people have a notion from pictures they have seen that God is a rather grumpy-looking old man with an off-white beard, looking something like myself at times. But this is, of course, you can't depict God. How do you depict something that has no corporal parts? Impossible. So you have to use something to which humans can relate. Unfortunately, pictorially speaking, God has always been shown as if he has a gallbladder problem and a secret sorrow, and this hasn't done his image much good. This is probably why the Hebrews were so strongly advised not to make such images. Anyway, this means that God could make aliens that look nothing physically like us, that look bizarre, way out, strange, but would still be made in God's image. The whole question is, should the church try to convert them, or should it leave them alone? Missionary work has gone askew many a time and oft, because the missionaries feel, God, I wish I had 3 hands. No, that's not what the missionaries feel. But with this, would you kindly not laugh at me? I can't help it. I'm old. Now, God could give the same special mental character he gave humans. And humans are different from the lower animals. They have different characteristics that impose upon them responsibilities that are not shared by your dog, for example. Your dog, if you're attacked, may fight loyally to defend you, and it will have a great deal of affection for you, but it doesn't ask itself, are you in the right or in the wrong? In that sense, your dog is a little like President Bush fighting for the United States. But the point here is that humanity has a different outlook, and it may well be that aliens created have a different outlook also. None of this, though, contradicts the existence of extraterrestrials. If God conceived man in his own image and likeness, he could conceive extraterrestrials. So where has the idea come from that the appearance of extraterrestrials would turn on its head all manner of Christian belief and Jewish belief? There's a special Jewish problem coming up for Jewish members of our audience, which I shall touch on in a moment. But the thing is, it shouldn't contradict belief, but it somehow does. Why? Well, I think it's probably because there is not a mention of extraterrestrials in the Bible. I'm not one of those people who thinks that the biblical appearances of angels and things really reflect extraterrestrial intervention. But extraterrestrials that are called extraterrestrials as such are certainly not mentioned. Now, what you've got to remember is there is no reason why they should be mentioned. The Bible is a book written for humans dealing with human development and human behavior. Excelsior.
I think you have to go a step further.
You said this. Can you? Yes, that sounds all right. Now, what you see up there is a kangaroo. Kangaroos are not mentioned in the Bible. This does not mention. This does not mean that kangaroos do not exist. Very few, even the most fundamentalist of biblical readers, would suggest that the lack of kangaroolity in the Bible indicates the lack of kangaroo. And I would point out that the verse, the animals went in 2 by 2, the elephant and the kangaroo, is not an original quotation from the Bible. Now, but this is the whole thing. People think if there are beings in the stars, they should be mentioned. But the big question to ask here is why? Unless the being's interaction with humans were to affect the plan of God for humans as such, there is no reason for their being mentioned. Some people, of course, would decide, and here we meet a theme that has actually cropped up in previous speeches, they would decide that the whole question of whether or not extraterrestrials would interfere with Christian belief is not a question at all, because everybody knows only loonies believe in extraterrestrials. Now, why should that be put forward? And I'll tell you why. It's because people have very limited horizons. Unless a thing is something either within their own experience or something that has been backed up very thoroughly by such well-known and truthful organizations as the Sun newspaper, they have a tendency not to believe it. They'll believe anything about a celebrity, however untrue it may be, but suggest someone has come down from another planet, and they'll scoff. Oh, they'll print the story, it sells, but there will be a good amount of scoffage. And if you have a situation where someone is interviewed on the radio or television, the radio announcer will be kind of giggling at the person he's talking to. I was really abducted by UFOs and they were really pleasant. Yes, of course, do wrong. We're taking you very seriously, Mr. Lewis, or whatever his name may be. And the thing is that people cannot believe something so strange. My mother did not believe man would ever walk on the moon. It was too way out an idea, yet she lived to see them do so. Well, she didn't actually, she saw a television picture of them doing so. She wasn't up there with them. For some reason, she wasn't invited on that particular voyage. But she saw enough to convince her that the episode had taken place. Now, I had a little pupil, a wee Scottish boy. Are there any Scottish people here? Thank God for that. The last time I made Scottish jokes, I found there was a contingent from the Edinburgh Fortean Society present, and the looks on I was getting from their faces would freeze porridge. Now, this little boy was in a current affairs class, and somebody asked me, did I believe in UFOs? And I said, I honestly don't know. I've never really studied them. And he looked up at me and he said, but there cannot be such things. That translated into English means, there cannot be any such things. There cannot be such things as UFOs. He was equally skeptical about the Loch Ness Monster. There cannot be anything like that. Certainly not in Scotland. He also denied they spoke Gaelic in Scotland. There's only one language in Scotland. It's pure English like I'm speaking now. But his attitude reflects that of a terrible lot of the general public. One school I was teaching, in a boarding school, it had a matron with a face that was, I think the best term for it would be serrated. And she was generally to be seen hanging off the end of a cigarette. Not the lighted end, I hasten to add. But one day somebody said, could ghosts, or as Richard calls them, ghosts, could they exist? And she immediately said, no! No! Things like that don't exist. And she gave an airy laugh and nearly set fire to the clothing hanging overhead. But the point is, there are some people who cannot believe in anything beyond a very limited spectrum of what they consider normal. This happens in science too. The first scientist showed that the corpse of a duck-billed platypus tore it apart trying to find the wire because a creature like this could not exist. Happily, the duck-billed platypus was dead. Anyway, what I'm trying to show you is, for a lot of people, the whole concept of people who are not from this planet just cannot be entertained. And the idea that God would have anything to do with them, well, for goodness sake. Now, these are people who go to church, believe in God, well, a lot of them do, but they can't believe that he could make any other beings. Some of you may remember the House of Lords UFO debate. It was initiated by Lord Clancarty, who wrote under the pseudonym of Brinsley Le Pere Trench. That was his actual name, actually. And one of the lords said afterwards, but I thought God loved only us. And there was pathos in his voice. And you could see that the man was speaking not because he had done any intensive research into the matter, whether religious or directly biblical, but simply because he just could not conceive of such things. And for many Fortean phenomena, the same things apply. There are people who cannot stretch their minds. Now, I remember I was in class once, and when I was a teacher, my classes often got off the subject. You may find this hard to believe. But I was teaching one day about how to prepare a body for burial. And I then switched to phantom pregnancies in men. And the thing is that although the children believed me that it could happen, if they had been told by a fellow child, or by someone less erudite than myself, they just would not have believed that as possible. It was a complete non-starter. Men swelling up, they only do it if they eat too much, or lead a debauched lifestyle. But they don't do it because they're pregnant in sympathy. But of course it does happen occasionally. I never felt any such symptoms when my wife was expecting, and I'm a hypochondriac of the deepest dye, but phantom pregnancy has passed me by. Now, the point is, the fact that this was so far beyond what they believed to be possible shows that there are things that you think could not happen, yet can. Last night we heard some very fascinating lectures about things that many of us would find quite hard to digest. But they did happen. Now, how should Christian churches approach ETs? Well, now, the Roman Catholic Church has actually worked out a strategy for this. They don't, of course, claim to have met any ETs, but whenever the Roman Catholic Church starts working out a strategy, it generally knows what's coming. For example, they were preparing for the decolonization of Africa by appointing African bishops before everybody suddenly pulled out in 1960. It is rumored amongst conspiracy theorists that President Eisenhower met an alien and he had a Catholic bishop with him. That's probably sheer bushball, because anytime I remember Eisenhower, he was always on the golf course, and unless it was a golf-playing alien, he is most unlikely to have encountered him. But what would be the reaction? Well, now, F.J. Connell of the Catholic University of America is one of the first persons who has spoken on this. He has said it depends on what their spiritual state is, not what they look like. They can have 7 arms each and kind of eyes out on stalks and look generally like one or two of the shadier members of the audience at the back here, and yet be fully in the image and likeness of God. Now, they might have committed something equating to original sin, a sort of collective thing that somehow makes the whole race not good enough for heaven. In that case, they might be saved either through the sacrifice of Christ on earth, or more likely through some other sort of procedure of which we know nothing. They might, on the other hand, be pure creatures who are so good they never committed original sin, in which case they'd be well advised to stay away from us because they might get very easily corrupted by the corruptions of earth. They might they might be very strange, evil beings to be avoided at all costs. I don't believe that if there is a God, he would create beings that are evil. But beings can develop evil very easily. And some people have a greater tendency towards it and have a greater struggle to suppress it. But even the wickedest of people can manage to suppress his wickedness. I'm not very good. I could tell you tales about myself that would make your hair curl, but I'm not going to. What a disappointment, I really say. Now, at the Gregorian University in Rome, you will find that Domenico Grassi, theologian, has this to say. A race which has committed some sort of original sin, God might or might not redeem them. My feeling is God will do his darndest to redeem them. If he's going to do it for the human race, why not for other races? There could be a race without original sin which would require no redemption. And there could be a very intelligent race of animals which were able to make sort of spaceships and things but would not know anything of God. Now, of course, humans are animals too, in the sense that we are all animal creatures. But what he actually means is animals with very great brains, but spiritually non-existent. But he does not deny that they could be out there. And how should the church respond? Well, if the sacrificial act of Christ is intended for universal application, the Christian should send missionaries out for conversion purposes. But if the sacrificial act of Christ was intended for humans only, then God would work some other equally valid way of saving the extraterrestrials. Now, to the question posed, the answer really is, we don't know what they're like, and until we do, we'll have to just hold and see. One other question posed is, I saw this posed in an interesting little booklet published by the Catholic Truth Society recently. Could you ordain an alien? Now, the Lambeth Conference recently has had its problems with what it can and cannot ordain. But when aliens turn up, the answer is, if A applies, and they need to be changed to Christians, or should be changed to Christians, yes. If B applies, and they shouldn't, no, because they would have their own kind of priesthood, possibly, or maybe they'd be a priestless race. Knowing some priests I've run into, that is not always a bad thing. Now, in the evangelation of other species or in encounters with them, the one thing you should try not to do is impose your own culture on them. This has been a mistake made by missionaries throughout the earth. If you see primitive people t-shirt and smoking a cigarette in the middle of a village, you think they've demeaned themselves somehow because they've adopted the ways of the West. They have completely submerged their own culture. With missionaries has often come a culture that is decadent in its non-religious viewpoints, and sometimes a good deal of bigotry that has been dangerous in its religious viewpoints. But certainly you should not try to change your Martian into an Earthman. Not that I'm saying there's life on Mars, I've never been there, but I'm just using Martians as an example. But recently the Vatican has upped its extraterrestrial viewpoint with Corrado Balducci, Excelsior. Well, that is the Gregorian University, another Excelsior. There he is, he's just under the spaghetti and he is feeling very, very friendly. But Corrado Balducci has a long history. He was the exorcist of the Diocese of Rome. Demons was his strong point, but he has said very clearly, extraterrestrial, not demons. Now, I hope my faultless Italian accent has not confused anyone. No, according to Balducci, God's power is limitless, so it is possible that aliens exist. Angels are spirits. Humans are very much bodily creatures. They have a spirit, but they're very much bodily creatures. There has to be something in between. Laws of logic. Well, I don't know that there has, but he seems to think so. And euphonauts are not demons, nor are they the product of psychological impairment. In other words, not everyone who claims to have seen someone come out of a UFO should reserve a room at the local booby hatch. The point he is making is that too many people believe these things, particularly the last one. Too many people believe that if you've seen a UFO or its contents, no, you need help, you need help. Strangely, there are two groups of Protestant theologians with regard to this. Now, your average liberal Protestant theologian barely believes in God. So ETs are completely out. Those are the sort of things children believe in, fairy tales. People like Paul Tillich have said there might be things out there, but as a general rule, the liberal Protestant says no. But down in the deep south, where the Everglades smolder, or whatever you call all the heat it makes that they do, there are preachers who know all about UFOs. What are their inhabitants? They are demons! They are demons! And if you have... Why would demons need flying saucers, one has to ask? Demons are perfectly capable of appearing... I'm not saying all demons are puffs, but they are perfectly capable of appearing. They do not need constructed craft in which to appear. But unfortunately, in the 19th century, some backwoods theologian produced an edited form of the Bible, the edited bits being the bits he had added into the margin. And he said a thing called the rapture was coming. All the very good people would be whipped up to heaven 1,000 years before Armageddon. Then there would be 1,000 years of terrible conflict. And then Armageddon would finally come. And anyone who didn't belong to a very evangelical fundamentalist Protestant organization, they were damned and they'd go down with the demons. They're hot stuff on demons. This, I think, is why Balducci was so sort of firm in saying, well, I've been an exorcist, but these are not demons, and it is foolish to treat them as such. What about other religions, though? For example, Judaism. Supposing the Jewish authorities thought these aliens should be converted to Judaism, but suppose they had no appendage one could circumcise. Well, I mean, there'd be a problem. And none of them could, well, I mean, they'd have to be liberal Jews, very liberal Jews. But of course, it's a different case with the Muslims altogether, because as I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Quran, it says, Allah spread life throughout the stars, which means ETs fit in very well with Muslim theology, except that Muslims circumcise as well. Anyway, let us not stay on circumcision. Just for a moment, I will mention one other thing as soon as I can decipher my writing here. I can't. So I will skip that bit and go on to the next bit. The thump is that? Never mind. There might be an actual mention of extraterrestrials in the Bible. If you're familiar with the Gospel of John, at one stage Jesus, speaking to the Christians, says, I have other sheep who are not of this fold. Why is he waving at me from up there? I'm getting gesticulated at by David. It's a very That's fine. He says he has other sheep. Now, some people have interpreted that to mean there are other flocks of people who follow the Christian ethos or whatever variant of it is appropriate to them on other planets. It's only a guess. The remark is enigmatic, it is unexplained, but it is there, and it is right about the only part of the Bible I've come on that could be interpreted that way. Mind you, I don't claim to have read the full Bible. An awful lot of it is genealogies. So-and-so begat such and such and such and such begat so-and-so and so-and-so begat such and such, and they go on begetting each other till the end of the chapter. So, I will just add one final story. I don't agree with these people who would hold. Yes, come in. You've missed the exciting bit. I don't agree with those who would hold that angels are extraterrestrials, but once when I was teaching an RE class of fairly young children, a hand went up. Sir, are angels male or female? Excelsior, get an angel. Have you got an angel up there? No, that's Walt Tillage, I think.
The next one is an angel.
Right, get the angel up.
Now it said Excelsior.
Excelsior! Right, that's an angel. Now, as you can see from that angel, it's a bit androgynous. It could be one, it could be the other. But of course, the reason it looks like that is angels are supposed by most denominations to be spirits, and therefore they're neither male or female. So I tried to explain this, but they were very small children. Well, they weren't all that small, but they were small children, and I didn't want to go above their heads. So I just said, well, angels are thought to be spirits, and if they are, they wouldn't be male or female. And I looked around. They would have no bodies, and I looked around to see if there were signs of comprehension. And I saw one girl nodding her head, and she said, I know just what you mean. My cat is like that. It had an operation and now it's neither male nor female. I hope I haven't bored you too much. I can see Jonathan looking daggers at me, waiting for me to get off because there's probably somebody else.
Do I look as if I'm looking daggers at you? Who could possibly look daggers at Ronan? Ronan, carry on as long as you like.
Oh, I'm just
as long as you're for the next 90 seconds, I don't mind.
90 seconds. Well, 90 seconds rather precludes any deep theological speculation. But I will stop to give a sort of mental kick to Richard Dawkins, who accused Pope John Paul II of being a hypocrite for saying evolution was a perfectly acceptable theory. If you believe God created man like that and take the Bible absolutely literally, that's one thing, but as I say, the Roman Catholic Church does not hold that viewpoint. Many parts of the Bible are allegorical, and consequently, the Pope was not being a hypocrite at all. But Richard Dawkins, in the way he puts his atheism forward, uses exactly the same techniques of the most bigoted fundamentalist ministers of the Deep South, and he really needs to revise his approach. If any of you know Richard Dawkins, you might you might let him know I'm willing to give him tuition for a purely nominal fee. Thank you.
Coghlan. Well, I was thought, he's this nice chap. So, one year I'd run out of ideas for speakers for the weird weekend. Richard and I were really scraping the barrel. Oh, for God's sake, who are we going to get? What about that weird bloke in North Devon who wrote a book about King Arthur once? Oh, yeah, I wonder, has he ever written anything else? Friend of mine, you've written fairies. What's fairies?
I've written fairies. I had also written on mythology, names.
Oh, come on, I'm not looking for product placement here.
I mean,
but he'd written a book on fairies. And we thought, oh, we'll have the nice old man from the land of the bugs and the little people to come on over.
Let's be old.
You're only 11 years older than me.
Yes.
That's frightening. But we invited him over. We thought, well, look, he's a sort of senior speaker who'll fill in the gaps. That was 5 years ago. We can't imagine having a weird weekend without him. He's one of the sweetest and funniest guys I've ever met. I love him dearly. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ronan Coghlan.
Just in case anyone wants a lighter topic than the one I tried today, don't miss the Duncannon incident tomorrow. It's about a UFO incident in the south of Ireland where I knew most of the people concerned because they lived in a little village, the sort of little Irish village that's 2 houses and a broken wheelbarrow, as distinct from a big Irish village that's 2 pubs and a broken wheelbarrow. And it's a little more light-hearted. But it's absolutely true, except for the bits I made up.
So yeah, Ronan, tomorrow one must not miss, but I don't want you to miss any of this. The eagle-eyed amongst you will know that now it's an hour and 10 minutes late. However, help is at hand, because apparently Richard does not need an hour and a half to talk about what happened in Guyana. And I thought we were going to be perfectly okay there, because our next guest hadn't turned up. But now he has, finally, after 5 hours up and down the motorway. So after a break of half an hour, probably the top of the bill for the whole weekend, Dr. Carl Schuker will be in the house. You have a half-hour break, you have Nicola flogging raffle tickets. Come on, Nicola, do your funky stuff. David, let's have some music, please.